Siren. Please go with me. Kimura was invited by his best friend from high school, Sawada, to go on a tour of an abandoned house. Kimura himself has no interest in ruins. Sawada, on the other hand, says that the nostalgic atmosphere created by ruins is intoxicating, and that he finds it blissful to think about the people who lived there and to imagine the daily life of those days while looking at the decaying buildings. There was a reason why Sawada strongly invited Kimura this time. The ruins he wanted to visit were not only the remains of one of the most famous coal mining towns in Japan, but also a place famous as a haunted place. Sawada, who has been to such places many times on his own, was intimidated by the vastness of the mining town ruins and the ghost stories he had seen on the internet. However, his feelings for the ruins outweigh his fears, and he passionately states that no one can stop him. Kimura asked him what kind of experiences he had seen. Sawada's only comments were the usual ones about hearing footsteps when no one was around, hearing voices talking, or seeing a man in a work uniform. He said, "If that's the extent of it, you said you've had a few experiences in your previous tours of abandoned buildings. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of them either. I don't believe in ghosts." "Then why don't you go alone? I hear it's a pretty big place." "What is it? What, you're afraid of getting lost?" "It's not like that, hear me out. If it's just a big place or a run-of-the-mill psychic experience, I'll go alone. But I'm still inviting you because..." Kimura waited with bated breath for Sawada's next words. "I heard that people who go there go missing quite often." Sawada, with some atmosphere, told the reason for this. He said, "Missing, that sounds fake, but is it true?" Kimura asked Sawada in a mischievous manner. "I've been looking into it, and there are actually people missing," he said. Sawada then showed Kimura several online news reports. The local newspapers reported on missing persons, all of which occurred near the ruins of the mining town. Kimura, who had been joking around with him, became silent when he saw these articles. "That's why I want you here, in case something happens." "What if something happens? What if we fall together?" "That'll happen when it happens. Look, I don't care how long we've known each other. I'm not going to die with you. Please, Kimura. I'll cover the cost of 2 days and 1 night. I'm going to book a room at this inn." Sawada showed him a page on Siren that listed a ryokan at 20,000 per night. "It comes with an all-you-can-drink package, right? As you can imagine, we don't go exploring in the middle of the night. We only explore during the day and in the evening. So, let's have all you can drink and have a good time at night." "Okay, then I'll go. Then I'm going." Taking the bait from Sawada, Kimura decided to accompany him. On the day of the tour, the two set out early in the morning astride their respective beloved motorcycles. Both share a common interest in motorcycles and often act as touring companions. They headed for their destination at their own pace, stopping at highway SAs and roadside stations along the way. It was almost 1 p.m. when we arrived at the site. Since it was a little early to check in, Sawada suggested that we take a preview of our destination, a former coal mine. Relying on information on the internet, we headed toward our destination, only to find that the mountain road leading to what appeared to be the entrance was blocked off. A large no-entry sign was posted and the road was blocked by a barricade. The motorcycles were parked in front of the barricade, and the two climbed over the barricade to reach the mine site. The paved road was rough and rugged, and the grass and trees were overgrown. The road leading to the mine site seemed to have an atmosphere of refusing people, and the two men proceeded without saying a word. After 30 minutes of walking, a group of ruins of a former coal mining town came into view. The ruins were more reminiscent of those days than I had imagined. The decaying streets lined with many ruins in a wide area made it easy to imagine how lively the place must have been in the past. Even Kimura, who had no interest in ruins, was overwhelmed by their presence and immersed in nostalgia. Let's check in at the ryokan and visit again in the evening. Sawada had finished his inspection, and the two men left the ruins of the mining town. After checking in at the inn and taking a break, they headed back to the mining town site. It was not far from the mining town, only about 30 minutes by motorcycle. After a light ride on the mountain road, we arrived safely at the sealed entrance. Sawada's steps were light as he once again visited the ruins of the mining town spread out before his eyes. Perhaps because of his elation, Sawada continued onward and onward. Kimura could barely keep up with Sawada. Indeed, the ruins of this mining town were beyond his imagination. The further he goes, the more he finds himself immersed in the sentimentality of the place. The sense of immersion is unbelievable. I even had the illusion that I was a resident of this mining town. The two revisited the area and looked around, overwhelmed by the ruins spread out before their eyes. Sawada took pictures of the ruins with an expensive-looking SLR camera. Kimura took pictures with his smartphone. This place is really awesome. Kimura, a virgin to abandoned mines, was struck by the beauty of this place. This coal mining town, which flourished in the early Showa period, early 20th century, was once home to many people. The town prospered thanks to the high quality of coal, and many workers moved to the area in search of work. However, the town was tossed about by the waves of the times, and all that remains of the coal mining town is a shadow of its former self and the remnants of a dream. "Aren't you glad you came?" Sawada said, looking at the pensive Kimura with a satisfied smile. Kimura nodded silently, breathing hard, and was looking out at the setting sun shining through the rows of ruins when he felt a sudden zing of something heavy on his body. Suddenly, he felt a zing as if something was weighing down on him. Sawada seemed to feel it too, and our gazes crossed. At the same time I was struck by a strange sensation. Several crows cawed and flew away, just like in a scene from a comic book. The two sensed that the previously calm atmosphere had changed drastically, and they were unable to move one step from the spot. All they could do was watch as the sun began to set and the sky gradually grew darker. All they could do was to prepare themselves for the mysterious presence. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a siren sounded. The low, eerie sirens filled the air as if they were air raid sirens, taunting their fears. The sirens, like air raid alarms, continued to sound as if to mock their fear. How long had the sirens been sounding? Finally, the sirens stopped. What the hell was that? Obviously it came from somewhere on this mine site, right? As the two men were talking about the sirens, they suddenly heard human footsteps. At the same time, they both turned in the direction of the footsteps. However, there was no one there. There was no figure, but only the sound of footsteps. The footsteps increased one by one. And before they knew it, the number of footsteps had swelled up like an army march. I can hear people whispering mixed with the sound of footsteps. However, what they are saying is inaudible. The sound of countless footsteps and people's voices were leading to a coal mine in the depths of the ruins. Sawada screamed, perhaps unable to bear the fear anymore. With a screeching sound, he ran toward where his footsteps were heading. Hey, wait. Kimura, who had been left behind unexpectedly, followed. Kimura's voice did not reach Sawada, who was running half-crazed. Kimura, who said he himself was on the verge of insanity from fear, finally caught Sawada's back, dragged him down, and mounted him. He dragged him down and mounted him. That's not your side. Sawada, who was still in a rage, finally came to his senses at the sound of Kimura's voice. Let's get the hell out of here. He grabbed Sawada by the arm and started to run back the way they had come. Sawada looked back again and again. I have to go. I have to go. Everyone is waiting for me. He kept muttering unintelligible words. When it was getting dark, we finally reached the entrance to the mining town. We desperately continued along the mountain road, out of breath. When they finally saw a barricade, it was pitch black. The two of us got on our bikes and hurriedly left the place. When they arrived at the ryokan, the waitress was preparing to bring the food to their room. "Good evening, sir. Dinner is ready." The smell of the warm food on the table held by the waitress made them realize that they were finally alive. They enjoyed the meal and drank and made noise as if they could forget the horror they had experienced that day. That day, Kimura had a dream. He was in a lively town. It was dusk. Under a dim sky, many people pass by in the alleys lined with restaurants and taverns. The streets are somewhat old-fashioned. I felt a sweet nostalgia for the Showa-era retro atmosphere that I had seen in movies. As Kimura was walking along, he heard a voice calling him. I shifted my gaze to the owner of the voice and saw Sawada waving to me from inside the bar. Inside were countless customers, and Sawada was among them. Sawada was wearing a dirty t-shirt, work pants, and a thin black towel that looked like it was smeared with soot around his neck. The men surrounding Sawada were similarly dressed, and for some reason he suddenly understood that they were coal miners. Sawada gulped down a mug of beer in his hand. "Kimura. I'm staying here. Thank you for everything," he shouted with a big smile on his face. "Sawada. What are you talking about? What do you mean? You go home. Go home," he shouted again, raising his empty mug high. "Sawada?" Kimura woke up from his dream and looked at Sawada's futon, who was sleeping next to him. Sawada was not there. Thinking he might have woken up to go to the bathroom, he went to the tray in his room. But no one was there. When I turned on the light in the room, I found Sawada's yukata, Japanese summer kimono, sitting there in disarray. Then I noticed that Sawada's luggage was missing. He looked at the clock and saw that it was 3 a.m. He went back to his bedside and picked up his phone, which he was charging. Returning to his bedside, he picked up his phone, which was charging. He tries to call Sawada, but cannot get through. No matter how many times he called, there was no sign of Sawada answering the phone. Holding the phone, which was still on call, to his ear, he ran out of the room and headed for the entrance to the ryokan. The entrance to the inn was lit only with minimal light. I walked out of the inn, hoping Sawada would answer the phone. Sawada's motorcycle, which was supposed to be parked there, was missing. The front desk clerk might know where Sawada was headed. He hurried back to the unmanned front desk and rang the doorbell. But no one answered the doorbell. I had no choice but to return to my room and get ready. I had no choice but to go and look for him. With this determination, he steps out of the ryokan and straddles his motorcycle. He puts the key in the ignition and turns on the engine. Kurr 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 kurr. Normally, the engine should start at once, but it doesn't. Only the sound of turning the cell kept ringing. What's wrong? At a time like this. He gave up on starting the engine with the cell and tried to start the engine with the kick, but it wouldn't start either. Please start the engine. Kimura's wish came true, but the motorcycle's engine did not start. As Kimura sat drooping on his bike, a cab slowly approached. Did someone call for him at this hour? As he looked at the cab suspiciously, it stopped just in front of Kimura. After staring at the cab for a while, Kimura got off his motorcycle and approached the cab. The back seat door opened. Would you like a ride? The driver called out to me. I wasn't sure if I should take a cab that I hadn't called for, but I got in with all my might. I got into the cab and drove to a place near the ruins of the mining town. Yes, sir. The backseat door closed and the cab started to drive. The driver drove the cab along the dark mountain road as if he was used to it. 10 minutes passed without a word from either the driver or Kimura. What brings you to the remains of the mining town? The driver kept his eyes straight ahead and called out to Kimura. It looks like my friend is headed there. At this hour? Perhaps. The driver was silent for a moment, then opened his mouth again. "You have a customer over there, don't you? How did you know that? How was it? How was? That's a place you don't want to get too close to." "What do you mean?" "Locals would not go near there first. Too many things have happened there. People have gathered, they have left, they have prospered, they have gone out of business, and nothing has happened. There was a big accident, a lot of people died, and then there was no one left. All that's left is the wreckage of so many dreams." The driver continued. "The remains of the coal mine are still smoldering. Like coal cinders, it contains people's thoughts, dreams, and hopes. Isn't it funny? There's nothing left." He shook his shoulders a little and laughed. "You heard it, didn't you? The sirens." Through the rearview mirror, the driver's expression returned to a straight face. The driver's words froze me in my tracks. "It's not just a siren," he said. "It's a siren that's looking for people. They are gathering. They are looking for people who will stay in that town. They are looking for people who will stay there. They say they're not done with this mining town. That's why I've come for you." I shuddered deeply when he said he had come for me. When the driver finished, he turned on the car radio. The sound of sirens on the radio was the same as the one I had heard at the mine site. I was too terrified to utter a single word. But you know, whether you gather people or bring them there, it's already over. So, you should just go home. But I'm sorry, but you have to give up your companion. Because he is fascinated and enchanted. So you will never go back. Just like me. I opened my eyes with a huff and found myself in an inn room. The sun was shining brightly, and I knew that the night had dawned. I heard the sound of wild birds outside. Fearfully, I shifted my gaze to the futon next to me. Sawada, who should have been sleeping, was not there. I knew he had gone. With a deep sigh, he recalled his conversation with the driver and understood that Sawada had not returned. Tears fell from Kimura's eyes as he recalled Sawada's words of gratitude in his dream. He then contacted the front desk and explained that Sawada had suddenly disappeared from the room. He then contacted the police, who began their investigation. I will omit this part of the story, but the conclusion was that Sawada could not be found. The person in charge explained to me in a roundabout way that there were several such cases a year and that all of the missing persons had not been found. We met Sawada's parents again after a long time since their high school graduation. Both of them looked a little old, but more than that, they looked exhausted. It was no wonder, their only son, Sawada, had gone missing. The heartache was too much to bear. Still, they behaved stoutly and expressed their gratitude to Kimura for his active cooperation in the investigation, for accompanying them on their last trip, and above all, for being good friends with their son since high school. 10 years have passed since then. Sawada has still not been found. In the album on my phone, there is still a picture of Sawada taken at the site of the mining town. Sawada is probably there. I want to say something to him. You invited him on this trip, and you were supposed to cover the lodging costs, but I paid for both of us. He wants his money back. I know we will never see each other again. Sawada in the photo had a big smile on his face. He is surely living happily in that town, Kimura believes. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.